Hey kinfolk, Brian here with Bearded Axe, and today we're talking about easy victories and my feelings towards them. But before I do, let's talk about my support pages. So my Ko-Fi, my Patreon, and my Etsy. All of those go a long way to support my channel, and I really do appreciate it. And it buys a nice little camera package that you guys are seeing now. And comparing it to my old videos, this looks way, way better. And I just want to say thank you guys for sending your support and buying my stuff on Etsy. So check all those out. There's a lot of great options, and if you just have a few bucks, send them my way. But of course, if you guys have been quarantined since the COVID and you guys haven't been working, you're short on cash, totally understandable. You know, what you can do is like, sub, share, comment, all of that stuff. All that engagement actually helps the channel, and it is very valuable. So go ahead and send that on over, and it really does help me. So, as always, I thank you for all that you guys do. I really do appreciate it. Now on to the subject. Something that is freely given has no value, and likewise, easy victories is in that category. I hate easy wins. Now, I mean, I like to work for it. I like to have the idea that I might succeed at something, that there's a very good possibility that we'll succeed. If it's just a one-way fight, where you have the odds are always against you, then it's not really fun, and it's not really fun for either side, because the winners just didn't put much effort into it, so it doesn't really have any value, right? Something that is freely given has no value. And likewise, why bother putting in any effort if I can't win? That there's nothing I can do to change my fate. And more than often than not, than I've seen especially with player versus environment kind of LARPs, where you have the players and then you have the NPCs, which are monsters, bad guys, or whatever, and they're fighting, and it's almost always overwhelmingly a PC victory, and it's super easy, and it's just like, it's kind of boring. And if there's no threat of loss or death for characters, then there's no excitement. There's nothing risked, nothing gained. And that's what I'm getting at, and I really hate that. It's like, why show up at this adventure? It's like, if it's just a boring story. If there's nothing really, you guys get what I'm saying. It's like you're cheating your players by giving them an easy victory. And I think that ultimately they might not initially appreciate that effort of like an easy victory and things like that. But I think in the long run, you're going to have this galvanizing force with your PCs, and where they're kind of like, oh, you remember that fight we had like last year where we almost didn't make it? Like, oh yeah, and like so-and-so lost his eye. But that's going to be like this bonding element that you're going to have with your players, with each other in these groups, and they're going to have these lifelong stories where they're going to be able to talk about this for a decade from now. I still remember stories that happened, over a decade ago, maybe 20 years ago. I still remember these stories, and I can still talk about them because we struggled and we overcame, or we came close to winning, but it was still a good story. And I can't remember even a quarter or even a tenth of the stories where it was like an easy victory, where it was just handed to us. I can't remember them because they're just not memorable. They're not interesting. And that's what you guys are trying to do. You guys are trying to get an easy you're trying to get those memories. You're supposed to make it a memorable event, and to possibly get a cathartic moment where they hit a point of exhaustion, or a point of like, I don't know if we're going to make this, and it reveals something about ourselves that we didn't know about, whether we're cowards, whether we're much more courageous than we really are, or how we just might not keep our cool under really stressful situations. And something like that is just, I think it's essential to the experience of LARPing itself. And again, I just feel like the plot, or whoever's writing the stories or setting up these mods, if you're setting up an easy win, that you're kind of cheating them of that experience. It's just, that's part of why I hate it. So here's some ways that I've seen some LARPs overcome that. One, I'm pretty sure they didn't start this, but Lands of Exile, for a while ago, they did a split mod where all the PCs split in half. And then the half goes and they become the NPCs for the final mod. Or there's usually 2 final mods. So each side can have a chance at the final mod, where Then you have like a 1-to-1 ratio of NPCs and PCs, and one didn't treat the other with kindness. Like they didn't say, like, oh, I'm dead, oh, and just, feign actual effort. They didn't hold back at all. And some, PCs actually came very close to permadeath. And that was a really good creative way. At first I didn't like it because I paid to be a PC, and I don't like the idea of paying to work for somebody. That's just my thoughts. But I warmed up to the idea after a couple of events, and it was like, you know what? It's worth the cost because you actually have a fight that's very difficult, and it's not an easy win. It's not a guaranteed win. PCs usually win one, but it was very narrow, and those narrow wins is what you really want. And so another way to do this is I've heard about it, not always, but I've heard about it, where you cap the number of players that you can have in game. Like I've heard some where they have a cap of 30 players. Like there's no more than 30 PC characters that you can have at this event, period. Then if you want to play, if you want to be involved, then you got to be an NPC, you got to be a monster, you got to be a bad guy, to where you'll have some of these really higher ratio NPCs to PCs where you have 2 or 3 monsters or bad guys per player. And that would be epic. That would be really cool, where, it's like you really have to, you can't just go into an engagement thinking that you're going to win. You have to really gauge the idea of like where you're headed and what you're doing and all of that stuff. Whether you want to engage in combat or avoid it altogether, because ultimately you're kind of risking, loss and death, and that weighs very heavily. Another way to do this that I've heard of, where you have 1 life to live, and that's it. Once you die, you're out of the game. That you have to start a new character. And that's a bit extreme, and I've heard that it's not quite as enjoyable because you're always on edge. You always have this anxiety of like, well, I don't want to get in this fight because this player, me, I could die, and I don't want that. And so a lot of combat gets missed because of that. So avoid that, of course. Another way that I've seen this done is that a friend of mine, Paul, up in Alberta, hey, what's up, bully? He said, so what happened was he got tired of all of his players getting cocky and just running into these combat mods thinking they're going to win, and usually they do. So what he did was he got a lot of friends from the SCA, and he got a lot of friends from his Viking reenactment group, and says, I need you to do this. And it took a bit of convincing to get them, but they were all playing orcs. And so he had like an army of orcs invade this town. And the players were warned several times, like, hey, no, this thing is happening. This is coming in. And of course the players were thinking, oh, what do you got, like 3 people playing orcs, like this army of orcs? Yeah, okay. But they didn't heed the warning at all. And they ultimately, this story is amazing. And it's like he was telling them, it's like, okay, I need, my reenactors up on this hill, and I want my SCAers on this hill. And so I want you guys to use your horns to communicate when you want to invade. And so one side blew their horn, and there was 1 orc. And of course the player's like, oh, it's 1 orc. Of course, we'll win. But then another horn blasted from the other side, from the SCAers. One guy stood up. It was like 2 orcs, whatever. But then they both blew their horns, and they had like 100 guys come up on that hill. And then the PCs realized, oh my goodness, we are in deep, deep doo-doo. And of course the Viking reenactors and the SCAers didn't pull any punches, and they came and they descended down onto this town. And the players, I'm not sure if the players won that or not, but maybe sometimes handing them a loss to teach them a lesson and kind of like knock them down a few pegs and let them know that, hey, at any moment you could lose, at any moment you could die. And that's kind of the spice of life. What's the point of just kind of like enjoying your life if there's not like an end to it? And likewise with the player that you're playing, and what's the point of it if there's no ultimate end, there's no loss to it? That's just not something. I think you really guys need to, you guys don't need to do anything, but I think that plot needs to really kind of consider that, to where there has to be a threat of losing, a threat of death. Without it, it's kind of pointless. But that's all I got for you today, nerds. I can't think of any other reasons, but if you guys have some, leave them down in the description down below, and so we can all kind of like share these ideas and even stories. If you guys have stories, I'd love to hear them. And likewise, everybody else would probably like to hear them too. So that's basically all I got for you today, nerds. I'm going to send you home with a be humble, be helpful, and be honorable. Thanks for watching.